Thanks, Alice. So good afternoon, everyone. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to take a relatively quick look at the capabilities in Prevero that can help you streamline and improve your sales and revenue planning process. Now, as a user, when I log into Prevero, the first thing I see in this particular example is a dashboard, and this is showing all the key KPIs that I use in order to run my organization. But our dashboards in Prevero can be very much tailored to groups of users or indeed individual users as well. So showing information that's relevant to the actual consumer who's looking at these various different dashboards. And as you can see in this example here, we're looking at our revenue versus profit. We've got our sources of margin and so on. So these are the kind of the key KPIs that we're using to manage our business. And with these dashboards, they're very much interactive. So what I can do is I can change the currency, so fully multi-currency in that respect. I can change the organization unit I'm looking at, the period, the product. But also what I've got is the ability to view various different scenarios. So as an example up here, what I've got are 3 different types of scenarios for my modeling, but I could have more, and I can call them whatever I want. So what this effectively means is that we can model out different scenarios, and then we can actually compare them and see which is, which is best, which is actually the worst, and so on. What I see on these dashboards, what I can select in terms of the business I look at, there's all security behind the scenes there. So we support segregation of duties, roles, and responsibilities. So you can control what people do, can't do, the data they can see, can't see, and so on. So we have our dashboard, and it's very kind of key here. It's showing us those key elements, so we can identify key trends, for example. And one of the things I can pick up by looking at my discounts, so here we're looking at actuals versus our plan, is actually in a few months, so May and June, we're actually giving away higher discounts in practice than what we originally budgeted for. So these dashboards can help us identify those key trends, and we can kind of come back to that topic in a moment. Now then, in terms of moving on to looking at some areas around the sales and revenue planning, what I'm going to do is moving to a module here that shows us some key elements around that particular subject. And you can see what we've got here is another dashboard, so some familiar charts there, but also what I've got is some diagrams, or rather some charts showing me my SAM and my SOM, as well as some average account scoring by territory statistics. So again, we're moving into the sales side, so this is a bit more relevant to the sales and revenue planning area. In terms of talking about workflow, a moment ago, you have the ability to incorporate workflow into your process. So what this allows us to do is get a real-time view of where everyone is in the planning process. This then helps us identify whether or not there's some people that are lagging behind, and we can kind of focus on those people to make sure they get their submissions in time and make sure the process stays on schedule. But this is all kind of real time, and it gives us a nice overview of where everyone is. Now, in terms of then looking at some of the other kind of analytic capabilities, we've looked at some dashboards a moment ago, but there are other ways that we can actually interact and analyze our data. So for example, here I have my sales report detail. So when it opens up, it's kind of fairly standard type reports, but it's kind of interactive, so I can actually kind of collapse these menu options here to get a more summarized view of my data. And I can see my actuals versus budget and so on. So this is all very, very good. But sometimes when we've got lots of data, so here we've got lots of different products that we're looking at, sometimes it's difficult to actually really understand what's going on in the data. So with Prevero, we actually provide you with some nice interactive ways of actually viewing the data. So for example, let's do a bit more analysis on our garden tools. Now what I've got here then is a kind of visualization of the data. And very quickly we can see that Prevero UK is actually selling most of our products. And then we can see actually our territories of Edinburgh, Birmingham and London are in the top 3. And we can see below that France and Switzerland and Sweden are certainly lagging behind. So what we've done here is we drilled down into the revenue there. But what I want to do is now look at another aspect of the data. So yes, the UK is way ahead in terms of sales, but maybe they're actually discounting a lot more. So what I'm going to do is switch to looking at discounts. And then just by switching to that particular type of element, what we can then see is a whole lot of color in this view. And very much similar to the kind of tolerances that we can use in the Microsoft tools like Excel, we can do the same in Prevero. So effectively, anything over a certain discount, I can make it red. Anything that's below a certain discount, it can be green, and so on. So you can tailor this to actually meet the requirements of your organization and how you actually want to manage your business. So what we can see here is that way at the top is actually Switzerland. So actually, the UK isn't giving away the biggest discounts. And then we can see actually the people here that are giving away those actual very large discounts there. So this is just one way of visualizing the data, and it's a little bit clearer than actually viewing it in a tabular form. But then there are other ways that we can view this data as well. So if I just switch to a different visualization, so let's go to a hyperbolic tree. And this is a really nice way in which we can understand how all of our kind of data is connected, and also helps us identify key trends as well. So at the moment, let's start with the UK. So generally the UK is looking good, but what we can see is actually there are some sales reps that are starting to give away some slightly bigger discounts than what we maybe would like them to do. So here we can see John Smith, and we can see Christine as well. So this is giving us a little bit of an indication in terms of some of the behaviors of our salespeople. So what we might want to do is actually go and talk to them and understand, why are you giving bigger discounts than everyone else in the UK? And then if we just switch back to looking at the group here from a central perspective, there we can see actually the Swiss part of the business, and it's not all bad. Zurich is actually giving away less discounts than the rest of Switzerland and so on. So it's just another way of being able to interact with our data, understand those kind of key trends, and actually not look or have to look really hard at finding those particular trends, because the last thing we want to do is have a great system where we bring all our data together and have one version of the truth, but then spend quite a long time actually trying to find the issues. So with this type of reporting, this type of visualization in Prevero, we're actually helping you identify those particular trends, and in this case, particular problems. So then some aspects in around the planning side of it. So what we can look at is some aspects of top-down as well as bottom-up planning. So it's very much a kind of key subject at the moment. If you follow FP&A trends, you can see a couple of weeks or so ago, there was some articles or an article around actually how you deal with the kind of top-down and bottom-up approach. And effectively, what we want to avoid is senior management just saying a number needs to be this and everyone else just trying to meet that number. It's got to be a far more collaborative approach. So there's essentially kind of various different groups that are involved in those discussions. So as per the article in the FP&A trends. So as an example then, looking at the top-down perspective, let's imagine we're the CFO, for example. So at the CX level, we have interaction with our key shareholders. We know what we need to be doing in order to maybe not breach our covenants and stuff like that. So what I see here is, we're looking at our 2017 budget, and what I'm saying here is actually it's got to be 25 million. So just by updating that number, you can see my chart has changed, so it's kind of very interactive. And from my perspective as CFO, for example, that could be it. I've kind of set the scene. This is what we actually need to do. But then it goes down to maybe the next level. So maybe the sales directors or the local financial controllers and so on. So how do they actually deal with this? Well, we can look at another example in terms of the top-down planning element. So what we're looking at now then is that next level down. We can see here there's the 25 million that the CFO has entered in here. And now what we're looking at is a view at the next level down. So here we have the various different entities, so UK, France, etc. Now what we need to do is actually work out how we're going to apportion the changes. So originally we were looking at 21.8 million, but now the CFO's up that to 25. So how are we actually going to manage that? So what I can do is I can say, well, actually, Sweden is not doing very well. We don't really expect it to achieve any more than what we originally budgeted for. So I'm going to lock that, and I'm going to not actually change that number. So if I now just refresh, we can see then what we've done is we've actually pushed the 25, or the difference between the original number and 25, down to the other entities. And if I'm not happy with that, if I think actually even maybe for Switzerland that's a bit too much, I'm just going to undo that allocation. And what I'm going to do here is actually say, you know what, Sweden and Switzerland, we're going to fix those. And now let's see what happens. So actually the UK and France have got to bear the brunt of that actual increase. But as you can see there, we can actually kind of do some modeling, we do the kind of what-ifing, we can play around the numbers and get to a point where we're actually a lot more comfortable with the numbers we're effectively pushing down to the various local businesses. So of course, at some point, it gets to the lowest level. So imagine now that we are actually a salesperson. So we're going to look at the bottom-up example. So when I log into Prevero, this actually may be my dashboard. So again, it's the dashboard tailored to my particular requirements. So my name in this case is Christian Jones. So what I can see, yes, here's my revenue and here's the discounts that we've got. But also there's some information that's more relevant to me, so a bit more personable. So for example, I can see what is my current pipeline versus the average pipeline, maybe in my team or in territory or in the organization as a whole. I can see my pipeline by my key customers. And I can also see some information around my conversion rates. So my actuals, my plans, prior year, etc. So we can bring in those different kind of timelines into view. I've also got my workflow status. So going back to that security point I made earlier on, I can only see data relating to me, so I can only see my particular status there around where I am in the submission. So in terms of then looking at a specific kind of bottom-up example of my planning, so here I've got my sales planning by product. And if I just expand out these items here, we can see our various different kind of products that we can plan against. Also, before we go any further, notice over here, this number. So this 549,000, that's actually come from the top-down planning process. At the moment, I'm actually looking at 501,000. So hence why we've got a little red indicator over here. So what I need to do is work out how I'm actually going to bridge that particular gap. But at least I can see there's a gap there of somewhat 48,000 or so. The other thing that we're looking at here is we've got our units and our price and our turnover. We've also got various different discounts, etc., being calculated. And in a moment, I'm going to just type some numbers in. But of course, the whole point of having a solution like Prevero is that we kind of cut down to a minimum that manual data entry. So what we can look at is the kind of driver approach to planning and forecasting. So as an example, we may actually, for this budget 2017, I may take last year's actuals or an average of last year's actuals, increase it by inflation to actually give me my kind of baseline budget, and I can go in there and make some changes. Or alternatively, I could use other types of drivers to calculate things like costs, for example. And if I go into my actual assumptions, we can see an example of that. So by product, what I've actually got are my key drivers to generate my cost of materials. So what we're actually saying here is by product, we have a percentage and it looks at the sales price and that actually generates my cost of materials. So I haven't got to enter that in. I'm going to try and work it out. Prevero is going to do that for me. But that's just an example of how you may use sales drivers. And there I can see various other drivers that I might want to use in my process. But going back here, in terms of entering data, well, it's very much straightforward. It's very much like Excel. So here I've got a brush cutter S240X, and I haven't got any products for that yet. So let's start to put some numbers in. So I think I may actually be able to sell 50 items there. So let's just actually refresh that so we can see what that's going to do to our margin. So there we've got our actual revenue there, and also it's calculated the kind of the discounts and the cost of sales based on various different assumptions that we've already put into Prevero. What I could have done is also said, actually, done it the other way around. What I need it to be is 2,500, 2,500. And then when I put that in, it's asking me how do I actually want to calculate that, i.e. how do I want to break that back? So do I want to change the price or do I want to change the units? Well, I just want to change the units there. So we can actually break back the other way as well. I can also add notes and commentary. So why have I made a particular change? Just by doing a right click here and going to edit. So, oops, this is a comment. I'm not very imaginative. And effectively, anyone viewing this information can then see that note as well. So it mimics the Excel type functionality. So here we've entered some numbers at a much kind of higher level. So here I'm looking at a yearly total. So I'm just literally putting in units and it's pushing it back or breaking it back across the months. But if I want to view the months, I can go down to that level of detail. So here we have actually our budget 2017 by the various different months. And let's just expand that out. And there we can see there's our S240. You know, there's a note I put in a moment ago. And I could change these numbers. I can use breakback and so on. Also, what we've got is the ability to actually use the forecasting capabilities as well in Prevero. So, for example, I could say, you know, maybe January is 5, maybe this is 8, maybe this is 10. And then what I can do is I can actually highlight the entire year, and then just by right-clicking, I can use the forecast capability. And then I can decide how I actually want to forecast. So there we have some kind of predictive capabilities there. So if I just want to use a linear trend based on some actual values, I click on OK, and there we've calculated that. So there's an example there of kind of playing down to a much lower level. So let's go back to our summary. So what we got then is, you know, what I could do is just to fudge numbers. I could say actually what I need this to be is, let's just do this at what, 550,000 at the top level, and let's break that back by unit. And now magically I've got to my kind of target, so everything's gone green, so that's great. So what I can now do is then submit this up to the next level for review, and they can see an email that's actually been sent to my supervisor to say that I've submitted this. And in terms of the kind of emailing capabilities, the alert capabilities in Prevero, in the workflow, we can have emails sent to approvers and to people that have submitted those various different submissions. So if they've been rejected, you know, I get an email to say my submission's been rejected. And it gives the approver or the rejecter the ability to put in a notice to why they've rejected that. But also in terms of general alerts, to prevent people from putting in very silly numbers. So if I were to put in, you know, 1 million units, that would be stupid. We can actually prevent the submission because we can actually say, you know what, you might want to look at that million number of units you put in. It doesn't make sense. So we can put in controls to kind of sense check what people are putting in as well. So that was just an example there of the kind of the bottom up. And then what we can do from a managerial perspective. So let's imagine I'm the manager. I go into view my workflow, and then what I can do if I just find Christian, so we can see when he submitted, and then I've got the ability to reject or approve. So in terms of then other aspects around the kind of sales planning, you've got the territory management, kind of managing sales reps. So here we have an example of how we might actually want to manage our customers. So this information here, that could come from our CRM solution. We can manage it directly in Prevero. It's entirely up to you. But effectively what we can do here is use a scoring system. And what scoring system you use, how you want that to calculate, that's entirely up to you. And what we can then do is actually get an overall weighting and then use that to prioritize our customers. Then also in conjunction with the turnover of the company, we can then calculate possible opportunity values as well. And then of course actually start to then rate our customers, and then, as I mentioned there, decide which ones we're going to focus on. So there we can see we've got a threshold of 0.8. Actually, there's not very many customers that we're going to actually look at to start with, but we can play around with this. So I can actually, what happens if we kind of be a bit more flexible and say 0.75? That then brings in a few more customers in that we can actually look at. And then just briefly, the sales rep management side is also very important as well. You want to make sure that you actually have the right salespeople in the right territories, so you can do, can bring in rating into your process. So here we can see the rating of our sales reps. We can see their average deal size, their win rates, what their pipeline is, number of opportunities, and then use this to actually decide, obviously we don't want a team full of those only scoring 1, for example, because that team's not going to perform very well. So we can use this to actually make sure we're allocating the correct kind of skills to the correct teams. And again, we can kind of show that graphically. And also what I've got is the ability to reassign my sales reps to different territories as well to meet our particular targets. Of course, everything that we do here flows into our income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow. So we talk about having integrated financial statements. So that means that as we're making, doing our various different planning and forecasting scenarios and so on, that's flowing through into those key financial statements, so we can actually understand, for example, from a cash flow perspective, what are the best scenarios that we should actually go with.